Hello everyone and welcome to my webinar of getting started with After Effects. This is the time where I would say it's so lovely to see all your smiling faces out there. I'm sure you're all smiling behind the screens. I hope you're doing well wherever you are, wherever in the world. I hope you're safe and healthy and cuddling in at home or in your studio, wherever you can work and learn. I also wanted to say hi to a few folks that reached out directly on Instagram, for example, Benjamin, Toralf, JR, and Gavin, of course, and many more. There's about more than 100 people. I can't even see all the names. It's quite a long list. So I'm very happy to have so many people interested in this webinar. So it's going to be a packed hour. I'm sure we're going to have some fun. And so today the topic is After Effects and how can you teach After Effects in an hour? So actually you really can't, because I'm working with it for 20 years now, and to be honest, I think it's one of my favorite tools. It's very complex, but it's also easy at the same time. So if you know Photoshop and if you're familiar with some of those tools, then you should have a pretty good understanding. So I'm here to give you a head start, just to get over the hump of the first fear of starting up with After Effects. Before we get started, I'd like to share my reel with you, so you get a little bit of overview of what I and what we in our studio are usually working with. And everything that you see is touched After Effects in some way or the other. There's also a lot of Cinema 4D involved, which is the 3D application of our choice. But there's a lot of After Effects. This might give you some inspiration. Not sure everyone can do the same stuff after just 1 hour. Again, it takes some patience and practice. But here we go. So let's check this out. So let me see. Oop. Where is my cursor? Oh, all right, 1 second. And here we go. I'm not sure if that worked or not. Let me just check with the video. You can't see the video. Okay, let me just play it with the screen share. Let me just go back and play it like this. All right, so that's that. Hope you enjoyed this one. Again, a lot of work was put into that. It's a lot of 3D and 2D as well. But let's get back to our topic. We have so much to talk about. And first of all, I wanted to say a big thank you to BenQ for sponsoring this webinar, so you can watch this for free. And I've been using their products for, I think, about 5 years now. And currently I'm using the BenQ SW321 in my studio right here. I'm looking at it right now. And in my home office, I have set up the PD3220U. And I can honestly say I really like these monitors. Recommended it to a lot of my co-workers and friends. And so far, I've only heard good things, and everyone is happy with them. So check these out. And since BenQ is so kind and generous, they also have a special discount code for you. You get 10% off in a follow-up email after the seminar. So stick around with that and look out for that email. So it's I think it's a nice gesture towards this kind of audience. All right, so let's jump into After Effects right away. Like I said, there's so much to talk about and show, so I hope I'm not wasting any time. So let's get right in. After Effects, it is mostly described as Photoshop with a timeline. That's probably the best I can explain After Effects to someone who has never used After Effects. It can basically take almost any file source that you can imagine, starting from, of course, the Photoshop files, Illustrator, videos, and so on, multiple codecs of videos. And to give you a rough tour around the interface so you know where we are at, here on the left, this is the standard default. I'm running After Effects, the latest version of Creative Cloud. It's 17.5.1. So just so you know which version I'm running. And on the left, you will have the project panel. On the right, you have the composition window, which at this point is still empty. And on the far right, you have a little bit of info, audio info, preview info to play. Of course, you want to see what you're playing. Effects, very important. And probably the second most important to the composition window is down below here, which is the timeline window. In the timeline window, you will see the timeline cursor move across time, where you will see your animation play. So how can we get started with a file in After Effects? Well, it's not like in Photoshop where you have one file that is the Photoshop file, where you have like one image. Look at After Effects kind of like, let's say, InDesign maybe, whereas in InDesign, you collect multiple sources like images, maybe EPS files, Illustrator files, and so on. Everything comes in and is being held together in an InDesign document. The same applies for After Effects. So whenever you import something into After Effects, it's only referencing those files. So how can we import? Well, the easiest way is to go to File and to go to Import, and then you go to File, and then it will ask you what do you want to import. However, I will also share a few tips and tricks with shortcuts, as well as where to click to be faster, because of course, who wants to work faster? Everyone. So one way is to get a faster machine. The other way is to learn shortcuts and little tips. So easier than navigating to your menu or hitting Command I is simply double clicking into the project window right here. And then you can choose whatever file you want to import. So let's go ahead and go to source, and let's just import just an image. Okay, so I'm looking at this image, and I pull these images from Adobe stock, because I was just wondering, like, where do I take my images from? I'll get to that in a second. I'm just going to import that JPEG, and you can see you have a few options. Don't worry about that too much right now. So I'm just importing that image. Okay. Now you see that this image is pretty huge, with 7,000 times almost 5,000 pixels. So it's a little bit too big for our likes of working with it. However, you could work with it. And then let me import something else. And this is a PSD document I have prepared. And this PSD document is just a quick composite of a basketball court. I love basketball, play basketball myself. So I had to go down the basketball road. And before I'm importing this, I will quickly jump to Photoshop so you can see how that file looks like. Let me just go ahead and open that up so you can see it more clearly what we have in Photoshop. Okay, so I suppose most of you know and use Photoshop quite a bit. And in Photoshop, it's the German version, so bear with me, but it doesn't really matter for this case. So in Photoshop, we have 3 layers. Okay, it's the quart, just an image, it's the shadow of the ball, and it's the ball. And these 3 layers are named, of course, so you always should name your layers. And when I go back into my import dialog in After Effects, I select the PSD document, and now I can import it as a footage element. And if I click on that, I can also import it as a composition, retain layer sizes, and just as a composition as it is. So what's the difference? Let me just quickly show you. When I'm importing that as a footage element, again, I will be asked, do you really want to import it as a footage? Because it suggests me to import it as a composition. I'll tell you in a minute why. You just go ahead, no, I want to have a composition. Then it will ask you if you want to merge all the layers, or if you want to choose a specific layer that you want to import, which is the basketball, the shadow, or the court. In this case, I want to have everything merged. And once I import it, it will come in as a single flat file, nothing else to it. So how can I animate and work with this file? Well, you can see that the composition is still empty. There's nothing to see. I can only see that little tiny preview here if I click through the images. So I have ingested all the files that I want to have, but I can't animate yet. Why? Because I don't have a composition. So the composition is technically like your canvas. Okay, so in your canvas, everything comes together, all your keyframes, all your layer assets, all the stuff you want to animate. So how can you create a new composition? Well, the easiest is to create a new composition by clicking this button here, but then you have to know what you're doing. So what is important? Well, you have to choose your size. Do you work in HD or 4K or anything for social media, for example? And you have a bunch of presets you can choose from if you click on that drop-down list, which is pretty straightforward in my opinion. You can also choose the frame rate. In the US and in Asia, we have 30. In Europe, we have 25. For movies, we have 24. So all these things you have to keep in mind. You can specify the resolution, duration, and the background color, which we can always change. So don't go too crazy about that. So I could click OK on this one, and then I already have a composition. And once I have a composition, you will see that I have a timeline that allows me to drag and drop assets and animate and move them around. There's nothing in there yet because obviously I created a blank new composition. And you can also check with this checkerboard to see if it's transparent or not, because obviously we chose black as a background, so I can select black as a background or just see the transparency. And we have different settings here. And let me just quickly go over the most important ones. You have 50% here. I'm running my 4K display at the 1920 x 1080 resolution, so it doesn't get too tiny if you're watching the stream. So this is why this usually full HD composition, as you can see, I can pan around, it would fill the entire screen right now. So that's why I'm going down to 50%. Okay, and you can hold down the space key and to move around just like you do in Photoshop, for example. In the timeline, you still have nothing because there's no footage element yet. So what I can do is I can just click that document and drag and drop it into my composition window. So you've noticed that I've drag and dropped it directly into the composition window. This will place it exactly in the middle, which is pretty cool. However, I can also click and drag and drop it into the composition. It will snap in the middle pretty much, but I can also drag it to anywhere I want to be flexible in my creation where I want to place stuff. When I have, for example, something I want to build and I know exactly where I want to drag it, and I haven't pre-built it in Photoshop, this is for you. All good and good, but still we can't animate the ball separately because if you look at it, it's a flat document. But we want to have the ball and the shadow and the court and everything separately. So this is why I would recommend importing it differently. So let me just go ahead and delete that file once again and also delete our comp. Now I'm going to double click again. And then I'm going to go ahead and select import as composition by retaining layer sizes. As soon as I hit that, it will also ask me if I want to keep layer styles editable. So if you have any layer styles in Photoshop, can maintain those. I say okay. And what you see now is pretty cool because it saved you a few steps. It already created a composition with the dimensions of the Photoshop document. I've already set it up in the proper dimensions that I want to have. And I can just go ahead and double click that. And now you see you have all the same layers just as you had in Photoshop, which is pretty fantastic. And you can start animating them. Let me just quickly check the chat and if everything is all good in terms of technology, or if I've lost you. Everything looks good so far. Cool. All right. How can we animate? Well, animation is actually pretty easy. There's a couple of things you need to keep in mind on how to animate, but technically it is about keyframes. Okay, so how can we access keyframes, and what is a keyframe? Well, a keyframe is a certain value saved at a certain time. So let's say at 0 we have this position saved, and if we move 1 second ahead, you will change the position to another position or to another setting, to another value, and in 1 second it will move. So just to give you the rough example, let me just solo that layer. The eye tool is obviously to hide layers, but this tool is really nice with a nice little dot here, small button, big effect. You can click that and this will solo the layer. So you can solo view only that specific layer, which is pretty cool. Okay, so now you can toggle open all the transform properties. So if you open up that layer, you will see transform. Okay, you open up again, and then you see all the transform options that you have for each layer. And again, let me just shout out to you, learn keyframes, learn shortcuts, because shortcuts will save you a ton of time. Instead of always clicking and toggling over those settings, the best thing is to know what you want to animate. And it's very easy to memorize. P for position, T for transparency, S for scale, R for rotation. So whatever I'm pushing P for position, R for rotation, and watch how the settings change. S for scale, T for opacity, transparency. That's just how I can memorize that. So let's go back and hit P for position, because that's what I want to animate. You will see that you have a stopwatch. Okay, that stopwatch means that technically you can start animating, because that stopwatch will create a keyframe. So as soon as I push the stopwatch, watch that. As soon as I push it, you will get this diamond-shaped little square that is saving this very specific position value at 0 seconds. Now, if I enlarge my view in the timeline, so this is the zoom ratio. You can see 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, and you can enlarge it so you can see every single frame. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're working with 30 frames per second right here. And let's say I want to have 1 second of animation. All I have to do is I go to 1 second with my timeline cursor, and then I animate it out of the frame, for example. Okay, so the ball will animate. All I have to do is I press space once, and then I can see the animation play. You can also click on that preview button, and then the animation will play. And as you can see, the animation will play for, I don't know, 30 seconds or whatever I set. So you don't have to wait 30 seconds for the playhead to jump back to review the animation. That is why I'm sharing the two most used keys, shortcuts in After Effects, which is the B key for the beginning and the N key for N like North Pole. So what can I do? If I move my timeline cursor to, let's say, 2 seconds, and I hit B, my composition preview range will be put to 2 seconds. When I move again and click N, the duration will be shrunk down to 3 seconds. So wherever my cursor is. So of course I can drag and click and drag this to any length I want. Let's say I want to have it at 2 seconds, and this will then loop. Okay, so this is how you can create your quick animation and review it. So this is it basically. This is how animation is created in After Effects. It's the same for anything. You can combine this with let's say rotation. So you can rotate the ball, let's say 1 time. And if you look at it, it will rotate 360 degrees once. But let me just go ahead and delete the keyframes. In this case, where's the position? Let's just delete that. And we are here in our original position. So I'm just going to move ahead about, I don't know, 8 frames, and you can see the frames right here. And then I'm going to select the position, go back to 0, because this is our position where I want to have the ball on the floor. Let me just unhide everything. And now at 0 seconds, I'm going to hold down the Shift key. So it's moving in horizontal or vertical axis, and I'm moving it out of the frame. Okay, so I'm moving it out of the frame. And then what I want to do is at 16 seconds, I want to have the same height. So it bounces. Technically, it would be not the same height, but let's just do the same height. So I'm going to copy and paste that keyframe. And when I shrink down the preview area, let me just play that. You will see something that's like a bouncing ball. It doesn't look too good right now because technically it looks a bit weird. So let's just pull it back into the frame, just like this, copy it again, and at 16, I'm gonna paste it again. So now you can see it looks mechanical. So technically we did create an animation, but it sucks, to be honest. It doesn't look natural. So why? Let me share a little tidbit with you for this one here. There's Disney's 12 principles of animation, and I found this. You can just Google it. Creative Block. They have those. They have a nice article where you can see all those principles of animation. It's about exaggeration, anticipation, staging, how you want to follow through, slow in and slow out, for example. And this is something that is pretty easy to do because everything that is mechanical, robotic will be like a linear movement. But if you start to drop a ball, it will accelerate over time. And we can simulate that, of course. So we can say the ball should start slow. So you can right click on this one and say ease in, for example, or ease out. In this case, ease out. The arrow has to point towards the outside. And again, control click. And here you can say ease in. Now, if you look at it again, you will see it looks much more natural, right? So this is a much nicer animation because if you look at the curves, if you hit that graph editor, you will see that the speed curve is slow, accelerates, suddenly stops, accelerates, decelerates, and comes almost to a halt, and then it repeats over and over again. So this is very helpful, and let me just show you, if you click on that graph editor again, you can also change the view to show the value graph. Then again, you can see the value, that it's not linear. So this helps you to create a more realistic look. And speaking of realism, there's that little button here that's called motion blur. So if you click on that button, the ball will have motion blur. So if I move ahead, you will see how the ball looks like with motion blur, and this will give a much smoother, more natural look to the whole appearance. So how can we further enhance the impression of that one? Actually, let me just pull it down just a little bit so it hits the shadow. Okay, so that's good. And we've learned we have to do squash and stretch, for example, to exaggerate the animation. And again, this is like creating a bouncing ball is like a topic for itself. I could fill an entire hour to do that, and I've spent about probably an hour to animate that ball, and I can show you in a minute how it looks like after you spend some time. But let's stick to that, and let's animate the shadow a little bit, because the shadow is obviously strong when the ball is in contact with the floor, but when the ball is up there should be no shadow. So I can animate that. So I hit T for opacity. So I hit the opacity options. I go to what is it, 8 frames. I say opacity is at 100%. and I go to the beginning and I say opacity is maybe, I don't know, let's say 10, very faint. Again, I select the keyframe, copy, move over, paste. And when I look at the shadow now, you see something like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and change the appearance of the ball. So the ball is actually squashed and stretched, and I can show you how you can add multiple values onto a layer. So obviously S for scale will toggle the scale value, but if you hold down Shift as in plus, Shift S will add that scale keyframe option into your layer, which is pretty straightforward. So I can set the scale here. But if you look at the anchor point, you will see the anchor point is exactly in the middle of the ball. But I would like to have a different, let me just toggle off motion blur so you can see it more clearly. I want to have the anchor point in the contact area. So I can choose that tool, that pan behind anchor point, what's it called? Pan behind or anchor point move tool. So I can move down the anchor point to its edge. And now I can scale the ball. And of course, you will see that the ball is being scaled in both dimensions at the same time because it's linked. As soon as I click that link button here, the ball can be obviously scaled independently into horizontal and vertical axis. So I can say, okay, let's say there's a keyframe here because the ball should be the normal position, keyframe here. When it hits the floor, it should be somewhat flat. Let's just exaggerate it a little bit. Let's make it 75%. It's not realistic, but it's about exaggeration here. And when it moves up, it will be, I don't know, something like this. And when it reaches the top, it should be 100%. So when we look at this now, and with motion blur, we have a much nicer appearance for that ball, okay? So this is the general principle of animation. And anywhere you see a stopwatch, you can animate those values, right? So all you have to do is click on that stopwatch and create a new value. And while we're at it, let me just, for the sake of showing you all the different options, you can do the same with Illustrator files. Again, composition, retain layer sizes. Just gonna open up this one here, and this is my logo. And you will see I have the R separately, and I have the circle separately, so I can animate those two independently. You can imagine scaling, let's say you want to have, I don't know, 20 seconds, scale, and this one will be coming from here, and this one will be huge. So you have an animation like this, okay? And as you can see, hey, hang on, Rob, you just imported an Illustrator file. Why is it also pixelated? Illustrator is vector and it should be scale independent. It is. If you are activating this little, I don't even know what it's called. I call it the sun icon. So if you click on that, nothing will happen with the R because the R is being scaled down. However, if you click on that for the vector, you will see, bam, all of a sudden it's all sharp. And there you have the animation. Super quick and easy. Of course, you can ease that down. Again, right click and say ease in. So the arrow points outwards and then it will slow down and look nice and smooth. So the same goes for Illustrator, Photoshop, whatever you want. How does it look if you import video? Well, let me go ahead and open up the almost finished project. Hang on, it's right here. Don't save. And let me show you this really quickly because I've spent about, I don't know, almost an hour animating that properly. So here's the bouncing ball thing, and I'm happy to share this file with you. If you drop me a line, I'll have to exclude the source files, but I can, you know, put in just a red or I don't know what layer for the ball, so you can examine how the actual keyframes look like. But this is not perfect, but it shows you what is possible. And again, also the shadow is moving from one point to another. So this is a very basic animation. But I was talking about video and images, and let's go ahead and double click again on this one here to import a video file in this case. And let's just go ahead and import this file here. And then you see that file, and then I'm just gonna drag and drop this into this folder. And again, you can create folders very easily by clicking on that folder icon and call this videos. And this is how you can structure and organize your files within After Effects. Let me see, there's a question or something. Okay, I'll get to the questions shortly. Some good animation and effects, good plugin. Yeah, there's a ton of that I can tell you right after the seminar. So stick around. All right, so we have that video in here, and how can we work with that video? Well, technically, you can just take that video and just drop it into your comp, and this will overlay the animation, and this will then have the video here playing back and forth. But of course, we don't want that in this case. It wouldn't make sense because it's just like, why would you add a desert on top of a basketball arena? But what you can do is you can take that video and drag and drop it onto that little create new composition icon. So as soon as I let go, it will create a composition with the exact settings, same frame rate, pixel dimensions, color, everything is set up nicely. And then you can play that animation or that video back, and you can add animation onto that video, which is pretty cool. Which also means you can add effects to that, and keyframe effects, which pretty much will blow your mind once you figured out what you can do, because the options are pretty much endless. And let me go ahead and let's create something that is a little bit Christmassy or at least wintry, because why not? So here I have that image that we've seen before. It's that 7K image. I've scaled it down to about 2K, a little bit more, 2.5K, 2,200 pixels. And I will add that into a composition. So I will create a new composition from scratch. Let's just do 10 seconds. Okay, it's very straightforward. I just put in the duration 10 seconds. So this is frames, seconds, minutes, hours. We're not going to create an hour-long video here. And just call it Winter Wonderland. All right. So I'm just going to drag and drop my image. It's a pretty sweet image on Adobe Stock. Speaking of Adobe Stock, you might be wondering where I got these images from. There's a pretty new, I don't know when they introduced that, but you can of course license and buy stock stuff here. But there's a free tab here right there, and you can search for winter or snow, whatever. And here's where I found the images. You can also type in the number and you will find that exact image. And these are all free to download, so it's pretty cool. You can download stuff and videos to play with, or just use your own content as you want. But anyway, so we have that in here. And I would like to add a little something to it. So how about adding some, let's say adding some snow, because it's a still image and you want to maybe animate your images. So you can go ahead and select layer and say solid, and this way you will create a new solid layer. Okay, I will call this snow, and you can make sure that the pixel dimensions are exactly as in the composition, and you can also use that button. So let's say you have changed it previously to 500 times 500 and you create the new layer. Oh, it's 500 times 500. It's not what we want. So you go to layer, new, solid, and then you can click that button here, and this will snap to the original dimensions of your composition where you're trying to create your digital snow. All right. So how can we add effects to that? We've seen how we can do some basic animation. Let me just look at the time here. And now I want you to show you how you can add effects to it. If you look at that effects panel, you'll see I have quite a lot of plugins installed, a couple of hundred. But you can also look and search for plugins. And the alternative way is go into effects. Of course, you have to select the layer, go into effect, and then you can browse all the different plugins that you have installed. Sometimes it's easier just to search for that plugin. And usually you can just type in something like snow, Or what I use most often, it's a free plugin from Andrew Kramer and Video Pilot. It's called Effects Console, and I have specified a shortcut. Once I hit that shortcut, I get a little window just like the like the spotlight window on Mac OS. So I select that layer, I hit that shortcut, and I can type now snow, and this will show me everything that is related to snow, everything that has the name snow in it. So it's a little bit faster than clicking here first and then typing hands on your keyboard anyway. So I just type snow, and then I click on that, and then you will see what will happen. So obviously you see nothing happens because it's white on white. So let me just add that to its native layer. Again, you go to effect. You can also choose the latest effect, and here we go. And now you see the effect applied on the layer itself. You don't really see it probably because it's very tiny. So let's increase the size a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna spare you to sing any Christmas songs right here, but you get the idea. Let me just shrink down the preview area. While it's playing, I can play with wind, for example. I can make it a snowstorm, something like this. I can play with the opacity. Okay, and it will keep playing. It will adjust it. And when you're wondering what this green bar is, the green bar is basically what After Effects has rendered into the memory of your computer. So it's important to have a lot of memory in your machine. In case you're wondering, I'm using a Mac Pro with 192 gigs of RAM, so it should fit in quite decently. And you can play with flakes on how many flakes you want to have, just some faint, something like this, super easy. I don't know, maybe more wind. So, but we're not there yet. You've seen how you can add effects, and again, everywhere you see a stopwatch means that you can click and animate that. So you can start with a very slow snowfall and then just increase it to a snowstorm, or change the wind direction. So anything that has the stopwatch icon, you can click and animate just to create more effect. But let me just add another video in here, and I want to show you a really cool effect. So this is the time-lapse video of clouds. I'm gonna add that to my project as well. And I'm just gonna drag and drop it onto this layer here. Okay, so you can see now I've added that layer, and it doesn't look good, of course, but I can use blend modes just as I can use in Photoshop, which is pretty awesome. To access the blend modes is that little button, toggle switches and modes, because I want to change from switches to modes. And this mode, of course, allows you to do something like overlay, for example, or multiply, which looks pretty cool. It's a little bit too colorful. So how can we change that? Well, you can go to Effect, you can go to Color Correction and Hue Saturation right there, and you can desaturate that image. Okay, so to solo it, this is with the effect, without the effect, without the effect, no, with the effect and without the effect, okay, on off. So we have that, and now I can play that back. So we have multiple layers composited together. We have the Photoshop layer, we have the effect from the snow, we have the clouds moving as a time lapse, and of course we can move around to maybe match the horizon a bit better. Maybe here, something like that. It still doesn't look good, but I'll get there. I'll get there. So again, you can choose between different blend modes. Maybe soft light is better. I think that works better. This would just add a little bit of movement in the background of the clouds. And again, you can always hit T for transparency and reduce the transparency, I don't know, maybe to 20%. Sometimes it's more about just feeling there's something instead of obviously seeing it in your face. So make it subtle. All right. And again, I'm exaggerating a little bit so you can see it more on the recording. So that's why I'm just going to add it to 40%. And as you will see, it will go over the house. Let me just go back and create the normal. So this will get over the house, but the house obviously is in front of the cloud. So we need to mask this out. And there's different ways of how to use mask. You can use masks based on luminance values, like in Photoshop. So everything that is white will be cut out and everything that is black will be left, or vice versa. You can just invert it. It's very easy and straightforward. But you can also draw masks. And let me show you how you can do that. You go to the pen tool, and then you will see that little icon here with the square and the black hole in it, which is technically the symbol for you are creating a mask right now. You're not creating a shape layer. So I'm having this tool activated. I click once, twice, and a third time, and I close that triangle. And now you see we have perfectly masked out the clouds in front of the house. It's exactly what we did not want to do. So how can we fix that? Well, you will see that you have a mask property all of a sudden. And of course, you can open it up and click again, or you just memorize M for mask and MM for more mask. So let me just close that. Okay, so M for mask, you see some properties. And if I hit MM in quick succession, you'll see all the mask properties, which is pretty cool. And now you can just go ahead and invert the mask. So the house is cut out, and you can also blur the edges ever so slightly so that it blends more into the roof of the house. So if we go back and play this back, you will see it looks pretty cool. And again, we need to use the overlay, and let's go down to, I don't know, about 30%. And this is how we created that image. And if you want to have a little scaling effect of both, so like you're dolling into that shot, you can do that pretty straightforwardly. So what I can do is I create a new null object. Okay, that null object doesn't have any, it's not visible, and you cannot create an effect onto the null object. It's just like an invisible help layer, if you want, that you can control other layers with. So how can you control layers with this object? So what I want to do is I want to have a dolly, almost like a zoom effect onto that. And of course, I can zoom that layer and I can zoom this layer, but I don't want to do that. I want to control both at the same time. So the easiest way to do that is I select both layers, and I have that little parent and link button here. So if I click that once, you'll get that little, what used to be called the pick whip tool, and you can control or connect it to that null object. And I can name this scalar, and this will scale anything that is connected to it. So as soon as I move the scale, you will see what happens. Okay, so that's pretty cool. I select keyframe here at 100%. And in about, I don't know, 4 seconds, I want to scale up to 110%, just a slight scale. So just you get like an almost immersive look into the scene. Looking pretty good, I think. And what I want to do in this case, to add a little bit of a vignette, just to focus the viewer more towards the house. So again, the easiest way is to go to solid. Let's call this vignette and make it dark bluish. I don't know, something like this. Not black, but almost black. So I have this black layer overlaying, and then again, you guessed it, you can use the shape tool with the ellipse tool, and you can just draw a vignette, something like this. You can do that manually, but let me show you a trick. If you select that layer and you double click on that icon, it will create a mask that has exactly the dimensions of the layer. So in this case, obviously an oval shape. If it would be a square layer, it would be a perfect circle. And again, we can invert the layer right here. So we invert the vignette. But of course, we also can hit MM twice to see the feathering of the mask. And we can feather this up really a lot to 400 pixels. And then we hit T for transparency. and then we shrink it down to about 30–40%. And again, this is with and without the vignette, so we are focusing much more on the center of that image. And of course, we can, change the appearance of the vignette to a liking, make it a little bit more organic. Doesn't have to be super perfect, but it gives us a good starting point. So let's add some text. You guessed it, the text will be added by clicking on that text layer. So you can type anything. Let's just go ahead and type the red house. Could be like a horror movie, I don't know. So I can choose the font. Let's go with semi-bold. You can select the size, and of course it's got to be red, I guess. I don't know, maybe white. I thought it looks better, but yeah, let's keep it a little bit off-white. And I still have this selected, so I could still type, but as soon as I move the cursor over, you will see the cursor change from the text tool to the move tool, and I can move it and position it anywhere I want. So you might be wondering, where's the middle? Well, the middle, you can use this icon here to show the title save, action save, or the proportional grid. So if you choose this one, this will show you a grid where usually back in the days where things were cut off from a CRT monitor or, like a old school TV, but it still helps you to guide. So you can see the middle, horizontal and vertical. And this allows you to center it pretty much in the middle. And again, for type, the same applies. You have all the values you can imagine and even more. So you can, fade that in, but you can also do some text animations. You can animate it. You can say you want to have the tracking, for example. So let's say you have the tracking amount and you can keyframe that again. So set a keyframe and set it to 0. And then this will animate like that. Of course, it doesn't look good. It doesn't make sense in this case, but technically, this is how you can animate stuff in After Effects with text. Again, just play around with it. I'm just giving you hopefully a little head start. Let's just create an opacity animation. It should fade in slowly and maybe scale down while it's fading in quite dramatically. Oops. You can see that it scales down to the left. It's my mistake because obviously this is the anchor point that is always will scale toward the anchor point. So I need to change orientation to center the text. And then this is the anchor point. We have to remove it a little bit. And as soon as I hit play now, you will see that now it's scaling down while we move in with the camera. So you almost have like a little vertigo effect. Very easy to do, really straightforward, but this should give you a good overview of what you can do. And again, you can, everywhere you have that stopwatch, you can create an animation, and you can also select all the layers, hit the U key to close everything down, or hit the U key to show all the keyframes. So the Americans said it's like the Uber key, to see all the keyframes. So this is how I memorize these kind of things. Yeah, this should be very helpful. And let me give you a little bit of a sneak into what you can do with 3D and 3D layers. So let me just import that shot from scratch, and let's just start because we have 5 more minutes. And I also want to talk about rendering before we wrap it up. I'm gonna select this layer here. It's the ape layer, and I want to have composition. Let's say composition like that. And I don't want to retain layer sizes, but I want to have the full size dimensions of the layer. And when I open it up, this is what we have. Okay, and let me just open this up in Photoshop so you can see it. You go to Edit Original, and this will open it up in Photoshop, and you can see what I did here. So this is the original. I shot this photo in India, believe it or not. I was there a few years ago, and all of a sudden I was walking around with my camera, and apes came around and just grabbed bottles out of the trash can and started drinking that soda. I was like, what's happening here? So I deleted that ape. I isolated the ape, and I isolated that tree in the foreground. So I saved those 3 elements in my Photoshop layer. And now what I want to show you just briefly is, obviously you can move the layers in each dimension, X and Y axis, but you can also move it in the depth, so in the Z space. So how can you achieve that? You have that little cube button here, which is technically creating a 3D layer. It's not like a volumetric, you can't, I mean, technically you can, but it's a different story. You can't have a glass, but it's more like having you know, like a piece of paper that you can rotate around instead of actually creating a cube. But anyway, okay, so it's flat layers, and you are creating, and let me show you the position values, X and Y. And as soon as I hit the cube, you will see a lot of values being added, like a Z space information, as well as for rotation, because you can rotate it now in any way. So what I can do here now is, let me show you the custom view. This is the 3D view. What I can do now is I can move that background layer back. I can move that ape layer, sorry, that tree layer in the foreground. Okay, so I have created some 3D space. I can go back to my active camera, and then again, I should create a camera. So I go to new camera, and let's select 50mm. It doesn't really matter. And now you can see it doesn't look quite right, because if I look at the original as a reference, I see that the background is way too small. So I will scale up the background to make it a little bit bigger. And the tree in the foreground is too big, so I can scale that down. But as soon as we have that, I can start to move my camera. So watch what I can do now. I can create a parallax effect. So for the camera, I can hit again P, and in 3 seconds, you know, let's just dolly in a little bit on that ape and move a little bit to the side. And this way we created a very quick and rough 3D animation just by using a still image technically. So it's a lot of fun. And you can blur it up a little bit to give it more depth of field effect. But yeah, so this is how 3D works roughly. Again, you can see our camera, you can see our 1, 2, 3 layers in the background, and this is how you can create 3D animation. Let me see the chat box. All right, a couple of questions. Oh wow, okay. I'll make sure to leave 10 minutes. We'll wrap it up in 2 minutes. And then I'll go to the questions. Cool. Hope you're all having a good time. It's so weird to talk into this black camera in there and not seeing any reaction, but I hope you're all fine and enjoying yourselves and learning a lot. Anyway, let's see if I forgot something. Blah blah blah. After that. Okay, rendering. So you've created your animation, and let's go back to our fantastic little title animation. And again, if you're not sure where to find your stuff, you need to be organized. You can also look at the tabs here. You can click through the tabs, which are all the compositions that you have created, so you can, you know, navigate yourself around right here. And let's go to Winter Wonderland, and let's say I want to render these 4 seconds of animation out to share it in my video in Premiere or on social media or wherever I want. How can we render? Well, to be able to render that file, you go to composition, and you have 2 options. One is adding it to the render queue, and this will add it to render queue. And I would really not suggest the default settings. They are really not good. What you can do is obviously keep it at best settings, but for lossless, you would go in and click and select anything that you like. Usually the way we work is we create a master file, which is like mostly a ProRes file. So for our master, we usually choose a ProRes 444 file that will be saved on our server, and this is like a pretty large file. a little bit compressed, but visually not noticeable. And then from that file, we can just pull down smaller web files, preview files for the client, whatever you like, but you don't have to re-render it if you want to export it quickly in a different smaller size, for example. So click on OK. Make sure everything is set up. I think for the start, you can leave it as it is. You click on OK, and then you specify whether you want to render it to. So I want to render it to Winter Wonderland, and click on render, and then this will be rendered, you know, from those 4 seconds. It goes quite fast right now. And then you have your file ready, and there's your QuickTime, and you can play it back and you can share it. However, it is pretty big. In this case, it's about 160 megs. So I'll show you another option that you can do. If you go back to your Winter Wonderland, you can go to composition and add it to the Adobe Media Encoder. Again, add to Adobe Media Encoder queue, and this will then add it to your media encoder. And change the resolution. Let me just go back. There it is. And here you have your render queue, and this might take a second or two for it to show, because it's sending it through some Adobe magic into the media encoder. And in the media encoder, usually you can also export a ProRes file, but technically you would mostly export to any web format. It's in German. I couldn't change it to English, but you can specify and search for any medium. So you have everything from devices to web, H.264. You can choose from a multitude of different sources, and then once that is appearing here in your media encoder, it will take again a little bit, but it will get there. In the meantime, I will look at the questions. All right, cool. Okay, so Francesco asked if I can recommend any good plugins for animation and effects. That's a tough one, because there's so many good plugins. One of the main features of After Effects is being a pretty open ecosystem. So you have literally hundreds of plugins. One source I can really recommend is actually I would say probably 3 sets of plugins I use mostly. One is from Red Giant. They have a fantastic set of plugins. Check them out. It's incredible, like particle plugins and all that stuff. I use that a lot. The other one is Boris Effects. Okay, I use the Sapphire collection really extensively. Fantastic effects. Really can recommend them. And the third where you can look is aescripts.com, and they have a collection of different independent you know, coders and programmers that create plugins that are really good. And while you're at it, the media encoder has decided to show my file, and now I can see the Winter Wonderland. It's high quality. I can you know, choose anything I want. I can choose a YouTube 720p file, for example, H.264. I can choose the codec here, and I can click on encode, and then this will encode the file, render and encode the file into H.264, and you will have a super small file that is pretty good to handle. All right, so let's see. There you can see the preview. Okay, rendering and encoding at the same time. Okay, and as soon as it's done, I can click on that link and see the file, and you will see it's 8 megs and looks pretty good. Let me show you a quick trick that I usually do when I render stuff. Again, this is like a bonus tip right here. What I usually do when I for example, finished a day's worth of animation and I'm done with the day, and I don't want to wait for the render and the encode to be finished, what I usually do is I set up all my settings. I can even add a time code, for example, time code. So you'll see time information, which is always important for the client to give feedback. You know, at 2 seconds, something pops in. Okay, 2 seconds and 1 frame, or 2 seconds and 23 frames. Could be like the beginning or the end. It's difficult to say. So then you can specify the time code, and then you can go to publish, veröffentlichen in Deutsch, in German. And then you can choose between your different platforms. So you can choose FTP, Vimeo, YouTube, and I have set up Vimeo right here. And that's where I usually upload my previews, and I can even specify a password if I want. And I can you know, set everyone with the password or visible to everyone. And I click on OK. And when I hit on render, this will render it, and after rendering, upload it to Vimeo while I'm not even in my studio anymore. So that's a pretty decent tip right there, I think. So so yeah, let's go through the questions. There's a ton. What about traditional animation in After Effects? Nika Udovic. Traditional animation as in cell animation, which is frame by frame. I probably would not do that in After Effects. You can import image sequences in After Effects. If you go to After Effects and you are asked if you want to import that, you can specify Photoshop or image sequence, and then this will be played back sequentially. But there's other tools like Adobe Animate that can do that much better. All right, so let's go through. I should do a longer webinar. Thank you. If I go too fast, there will be a replay, so you can watch it on demand and you can watch it frame by frame. But it's a good suggestion to have it longer. Okay, let's go through. Yes, there will be a replay. How many gigs of RAM do I have on my machine? Yes, again, I am using the 2019 Mac Pro with the 192 gigs of RAM. In my home office, I use a MacBook Pro 16 with, I think, 64 gigs of RAM. But honestly, you can already work with 16 gigs of RAM. That's what I had previously on my machine, and I was finishing quite a lot of jobs on that one. But I wouldn't go below 16 gigs of RAM. I would strongly recommend 16 gigs of RAM. All right, so let's go ahead. Same questions. How do we save an animation? Well, what I didn't show is how to save that project file. So that project file you can save again to your files here, and let's call this Robert. And when you go back to your, then you have your AEP file, and in this AEP file, there's nothing in that AEP file other than information where the files are. So you need to make sure that all your source files are still there where you save them. Okay, so that's important. Can this software be used to edit video clips? Reggie Lopez asked that. Technically, yes, you can edit. You can trim the length of files, and let me show you that really quickly. So if I take this and create a new composition in there, of course you can drag the beginning as well as the end of the footage element, and this way you've edited it. And if you have multiple source files in there like this one, of course then you can edit it, but I wouldn't recommend it because After Effects mostly has to render the files, at least. I mean, not for video, but it's not made for editing. You shouldn't probably do that in After Effects. All right. The pace was quite fast. I know. I'm sorry. I tried to cram in a lot of information for you, but again, you can rewatch the replay. How much time on average does one need to learn After Effects? Seems pretty complicated, my experience. I would say it really depends on how much you work with it. To be really, I mean, I would say look for a project to finish, make up something, or look for, just create something from scratch. and work through that. And then probably within a week, you'll be able to feel comfortable, and then it's just experience and learning. Okay, I've been so Nicholas asked about projection mapping. Yes, you can do projection mapping in After Effects, also maybe in combination with Cinema 4D. It's not that hard, but it takes longer to explain than I have time available right now. The replay will be sent to you via email. You can import MP3s to sync animations. You can import WAV, AIFC files. Yeah, I think I've covered pretty much all of the questions. If you have anything else, let me know. I'll stick around for a minute or so. Einar is here. Hello, my Icelandic friend. I've visited Iceland twice last year to give seminars there and also to shoot something for my upcoming Star Wars fan film. So that's being worked on if I have time, which I don't have right now. But yeah, it's been a fantastic experience, an amazing country, and if you ever visit Iceland, please say hi to Einar. And yeah, let's see what else is popping up. Thanks a lot. Can you share some of your links? If you want, you just drop me a line on Instagram or on my website, and I'm happy to share anything else. Let me know if you want to have that some of the source files. I can prepare you some of the source files with with the keyframes, and you would probably have to download the free assets that I'm using here from Adobe Stock to be able to follow along. But hopefully that should help. Do you make YouTube tutorials? Yes, very good point, Ivan. Thank you for pointing that out. In fact, I do. So you can follow me on my channel on youtube.com/Robert Hranitzky. And I do reviews, obviously, of BenQ as well as Wacom products and creative products in general. I've shared some of my work. You can check out my reel again, some of my talks, but most importantly for you, probably a lot of my tutorials. So here I'm showing a couple of things on how to create 3D animation in collaboration with After Effects. It was a lot of fun, but also you can go ahead and let's see what else I have. I have a pretty interesting tutorial that you could watch, which is this one here. This was a lot of fun. This was about cutting out a person that is walking on the street. It looks like this, and all of a sudden this person will be gone from the video. So quite crazy. Using the content aware fill, slightly more advanced. You probably can follow along, but this one was a lot of fun. And again, you can see a lot of my tutorials on YouTube. So thank you so much for the kind comments. Julia likes it. Alina, thank you. There's one more question. I've run into the problem of not having footage to practice editing since I don't film. What do you recommend for practice in After Effects? Well, again, there's tons of free stuff on stock.adobe.com you can download and play with. I can really recommend that. Just set yourself a goal. Let's say I want to do a title animation where you have a video, just as I did with the Winter Wonderland here. That's probably the best thing you can do. I shared the plugin info already. So yeah, I think this pretty much wraps it up. We've run a little bit over an hour now. And yeah, if you have any questions, yeah, let me just share my last screen with you again. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out either on my website, Hranitzky.com, or on Instagram at HRanimator. And yeah, all I can say is thank you for attending. Hope you learned a lot. Hope you got inspired to use one of my favorite tools, which is After Effects. Stay safe out there, wear a mask, watch out for yourself. Happy holidays, and I see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.